I stood there, coffee dripping down my new blouse, as the entire boardroom erupted in laughter. Little did they know that humiliating moment would spark an idea worth millions. I'm Madeline, and this is how my greatest embarrassment became the company's greatest victory. I'm Madeline, not the sort of person who usually stands out in a crowd. Growing up in a small town where dreams often stayed just that, dreams, I always felt I was meant for something more. Not that I had any remarkable talents or advantages. I was simply a woman with the audacity to believe I could build something meaningful with my life. When the email arrived confirming my position at Brighthaven Marketing, I must have read it 20 times before believing it was real. Me, working at one of the most prestigious firms in the city, the kind of place where industry-changing campaigns were born, the kind of place I'd only admired from afar while working temp jobs to pay my bills. I spent my last paycheck on a proper business suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, and practiced my introduction in the mirror until I could say, "Madeline Parker, marketing strategist," without my voice shaking. I researched the company obsessively, memorizing their client roster and recent campaigns. I even created a small notebook filled with ideas I hoped might impress my new colleagues. The night before my first day, I barely slept. I laid out everything perfectly: my outfit, my bag packed with a new laptop and notebook, even my lunch prepared in a sophisticated container rather than my usual paper bag. I set 3 alarms, though I hardly needed them after tossing and turning all night. By the time the first one chimed, I was already standing in my kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee, rehearsing possible conversations in my head. I remember touching the smooth surface of my desk nameplate before leaving, a gift I'd bought myself as a promise that one day it would sit proudly in an office. "This is it," I whispered to my reflection. "Don't mess this up." How naive I was then, thinking that preparation alone could shield me from disaster. How could I have known that my carefully constructed entrance into professional success would crumble within hours, or that from those ruins I'd build something far greater than I'd ever imagined? If you've ever had a moment when it felt like your dreams were publicly shattered, when humiliation burned so hot you thought you might never recover, keep watching. Because sometimes rock bottom is actually the foundation upon which we build our greatest triumphs. And my story is proof that the person they laugh at today might just be the one who saves them tomorrow. Walking into Brighthaven's glass tower that morning felt like stepping into another world. The lobby gleamed with polished marble, and everyone moved with such purpose, such confidence. I kept repeating to myself, "You belong here too." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was a blur of deep breaths and silent affirmations. My new boss, Richard, barely looked up when I introduced myself. He gestured toward a small desk in the corner and muttered something about a team meeting in 30 minutes. I arranged my few possessions, trying to look busy and professional while secretly observing everyone around me. They all seemed to speak a language of inside jokes and shared experiences, their tailored outfits and perfect hairstyles making my carefully selected suit feel suddenly inadequate. The meeting room was intimidating, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive mahogany table, and faces that I recognized from industry publications. Richard introduced me with a dismissive wave. "This is Madeline, our new junior strategist. Let's see what she brings to the table." All eyes turned to me, expectant and evaluating. I'd prepared a brief introduction and some initial thoughts on their current campaign. My hands trembled slightly as I stood, but I was determined. 3 steps toward the front of the room, that's all it took before disaster struck. I tripped on a power cord, sending my coffee flying. It splashed across my presentation notes, my new blouse, and onto the pristine table. The silence lasted only seconds before someone snickered, then another, until the room filled with poorly concealed laughter. "Well?" Richard sighed, not bothering to hide his amusement. "I suppose that's one way to make an impression." The meeting continued as if I wasn't there, coffee staining my clothes as I sank into my chair, invisible and mortified. By lunch, the story had spread throughout the office, complete with exaggerated reenactments that I glimpsed through conference room windows. I hid in a bathroom stall, fighting back tears and contemplating how quickly I could pack my desk and disappear. This wasn't just embarrassment. It was the death of a dream I'd held for years, crumbling on day one. It was while dabbing at my ruined blouse in the women's restroom that I overheard two senior executives who didn't realize I was there. They were discussing the Hartwell account, Brighthaven's biggest client who was threatening to leave after 3 consecutive quarters of declining sales. "Richard's approach is all wrong," one said. "We're targeting the wrong demographic entirely, but he won't listen to anyone." I froze, listening intently as they detailed the campaign's weaknesses. Surprisingly, I found myself mentally solving the problems they described. The demographic data they mentioned aligned perfectly with research I'd done for my interview, research that went far deeper than required because I'd been so determined to impress. That night, instead of crying into a glass of wine as planned, I spread my notes across my tiny apartment floor. The humiliation of the morning transformed into a strange, fierce determination. If these people thought I was a joke, I had nothing to lose. I worked until dawn, analyzing Hartwell's market position from angles the executives hadn't considered. Days passed in a blur of quiet determination. At work, I became nearly invisible, which proved advantageous. No one noticed me observing their processes, identifying the gaps in their strategy. I stayed late every evening, using the empty office to access market research databases beyond my clearance level. Not exactly by the book, but desperation breeds boldness. By Friday, I had identified the fundamental flaw in Brighthaven's approach to Hartwell's product line. They were marketing luxury when their data clearly showed consumers wanted authenticity. The solution seemed so obvious to me now. A complete repositioning centered on heritage and craftsmanship rather than exclusivity and status. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive proposal, knowing full well it might never see the light of day. But creating it rekindled something I'd almost lost on that first humiliating morning, my belief that I deserved to be there. It was during one of my late nights at the office when I first really noticed David from the creative department. Most people barely acknowledged my existence after the coffee incident, but David smiled when we passed in hallways. He caught me working well past midnight, surrounded by market analysis printouts and concept sketches. "You're either incredibly dedicated or slightly crazy," he said, leaning against my desk with a kind smile that reached his eyes. "Probably both," I admitted, too tired to maintain the protective wall I'd built. He glanced at my work, his expression shifting from curiosity to genuine interest. "This is for Hartwell? But you're not on that team." His question wasn't accusatory, just curious. Something about his gentle tone made me confess everything. The humiliation, the overheard conversation, my secret project. I expected mockery, but received understanding instead. The next morning, a coffee appeared on my desk, not the office sludge, but from the expensive cafe down the street. A sticky note simply read, "For strategists who think outside the box." It was the first genuine kindness I'd experienced at Brighthaven. Our coffee breaks became a daily ritual. David wasn't just kind, he was brilliant at his job, offering insights that strengthened my proposal. Our conversations extended beyond work. His passion for old jazz records, my love of historical documentaries. He made me laugh for the first time since my disastrous first day. "Why help me?" I asked him once. "Because everyone else is too busy laughing to see what I see. Someone with the courage to rise above humiliation and possibly save this company from itself," he replied. Those words sustained me through weeks of working double time, completing my assigned tasks during the day while developing my Hartwell strategy at night. David became my sounding board, my ally, and gradually, something more. The way his hand would sometimes rest briefly on mine when making a point, the lingering glances, we were writing a different story alongside my redemption plan. The emergency all-staff meeting announcement came on a rainy Tuesday. Hartwell had delivered an ultimatum. Either Brighthaven presented a revolutionary new approach within the week, or they were taking their $30 million account elsewhere. Richard looked ashen as he addressed the team, for once without his usual arrogance. "We need ideas? Anything. Everything is on the table," he said, desperation evident in his voice. People shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The company's biggest client was walking away and no one had solutions. I felt David's eyes on me from across the room, his slight nod and unspoken question. My heart hammered against my ribs. The proposal I'd been refining for weeks sat in my bag, comprehensive and ready. But presenting it meant stepping back into the spotlight, risking another round of humiliation from the same people who had laughed at me before. "Anyone?" Richard's voice had a slight tremor now. I thought about staying silent, about watching the company flounder while keeping my head down, but something inside me, perhaps pride, perhaps foolishness, wouldn't allow it. My hand rose slowly, almost of its own accord. The room fell silent. Richard's surprise quickly gave way to poorly disguised skepticism. "Madeline? You have something to contribute?" The underlying message was clear. What could the coffee girl possibly offer? Standing before them again was terrifying. My voice shook as I began outlining my strategy, but with each point, with each slide of my presentation, I found my footing. The data was solid. The approach was innovative, but grounded in consumer psychology. I had anticipated their objections and prepared counterarguments. I watched their expressions transform, from dismissal to curiosity, from skepticism to consideration. Even Richard fell silent, his usual interruptions absent, as I laid out a complete repositioning strategy for Hartwell's entire product line. When I finished, the silence felt different than it had on my first day. It wasn't the quiet of embarrassment, but of stunned reassessment. David's proud smile from the back of the room gave me strength as questions began, no longer condescending but genuinely engaging with my ideas. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity. My proposal became the foundation for Brighthaven's presentation to Hartwell. I was suddenly included in meetings, my input sought and valued. Richard never explicitly acknowledged his prior dismissal of me, but his actions spoke volumes, assigning me to lead aspects of the project, defending my strategies when others questioned them. The day of the Hartwell presentation arrived with stomach-churning anxiety. The clients filed in, serious-faced executives with the power to determine Brighthaven's future. And mine. Richard surprised everyone by introducing me as the architect of the new strategy, inviting me to lead the presentation I had created. Standing before the Hartwell executives, I channeled every ounce of confidence I could muster. This wasn't just about personal redemption. It was about proving that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected sources. I spoke with passion about authentic storytelling, about honoring the heritage that made their products special. By the time I finished, the energy in the room had transformed. The Hartwell CEO, a notoriously difficult man to impress, leaned forward with genuine interest. "This is exactly what we've been missing," he said. "Not another luxury campaign, but a return to what made us great in the first place. They didn't just renew their contract, they increased their budget by 40%. The champagne flowed freely back at the office that evening, with the same people who had once laughed at me now raising toasts in my honor. Success, it seems, is the most effective eraser of past humiliations. Within a month, the reimagined campaign launched to overwhelming positive response. Sales figures climbed steadily, then dramatically. Consumer engagement metrics exceeded all projections. My simple insight, that authenticity would resonate more than exclusivity, had transformed Hartwell's market position. Richard called me into his office on a bright Friday afternoon. I expected a simple acknowledgement of the campaign's success. Instead, he offered me a promotion to senior strategist, bypassing 2 traditional career steps. "You saved this company," he said simply, and taught me a valuable lesson about judging too quickly. As my professional life blossomed, so did something beautiful with David. Our late-night strategy sessions gradually evolved into dinners where work was no longer discussed. He brought me wildflowers one evening because they remind me of you, surprisingly resilient and impossible to ignore. Our first real date was nothing fancy, just a walk through the botanical gardens followed by coffee at a tiny cafe where jazz played softly in the background. Without the pressure of work, we discovered deeper connections, shared values, similar upbringings, complementary dreams. I knew you were special that first week, he confessed, his fingers intertwined with mine across the table. When everyone else saw a mishap, I saw someone with extraordinary determination. Our relationship deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. The first time he kissed me was after a particularly challenging presentation we'd worked on together. Standing in the empty conference room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. We kept our relationship private at work, maintaining professionalism while stealing small moments of connection, a shared glance across a meeting table, his hand briefly touching mine while passing documents. But outside the office, we were free to explore the growing feelings between us. To celebrate 6 months since the Hartwell success, we took a week off and traveled to a small coastal town, walking barefoot along deserted beaches, falling asleep to the sound of waves, waking up in each other's arms. It was the first time I'd truly relaxed in over a year. One evening, as the sun set in spectacular color across the water, David held me close. "You know what I love most about you?" he whispered against my hair. "How you turned humiliation into triumph, how you saw opportunity where others saw only embarrassment." His arms tightened around me. "That's rare, Madeline. That's special." In that moment, with the warmth of his embrace surrounding me, I realized how far I'd come from that mortified woman with coffee-stained clothes. The journey hadn't just brought professional success, it had led me to someone who saw my worth from the beginning. Looking back now, I barely recognize the nervous woman who spilled coffee on her first day. The past 18 months have transformed not just my career, but my entire life. I lead a team of strategists now, implementing the authentic marketing approach that saved Hartwell across our entire client portfolio. Brighthaven's revenue has grown by 62%, and we've attracted new business from companies seeking the same revitalization. What means more to me than professional success, though, is the change in company culture that I've been able to foster. New employees are welcomed with genuine support rather than judgment. Ideas are valued regardless of who presents them. The competitive, sometimes cruel environment that I entered has evolved into something more collaborative and human. My relationship with David continues to deepen. We moved in together 3 months ago, creating a home filled with jazz records, historical documentaries, and long conversations about everything and nothing. He proposed last weekend, not with a grand gesture, but with quiet certainty while we cooked dinner together in our kitchen. I said yes immediately. Richard retired last month, surprising everyone by recommending me as his replacement. "The future of marketing isn't in following traditions," he told the board. "It's in recognizing that breakthrough thinking can come from anywhere, even from someone you initially underestimate." Sometimes I return to the office late at night, standing in the same spot where coffee once dripped down my blouse amid cruel laughter. I remember the humiliation, the desire to disappear, the certainty that I'd never belong. And I'm grateful for that moment, for the fire it lit within me, for the determination it inspired, for the path it ultimately revealed. If you're watching this and facing your own moment of humiliation or rejection, remember this: sometimes our greatest setbacks are actually setups for extraordinary comebacks. That moment when you feel smallest might be preparing you for your biggest triumph. The people who dismiss you today may find themselves applauding you tomorrow. Don't let embarrassment define you. Let it refine you. Take that painful energy and channel it into creating something remarkable. And along the way, notice the people who believe in you before success makes it easy. They're the ones worth keeping close. This is Madeline, signing off. Remember, your greatest humiliation might just be the birthplace of your greatest idea. The only question is, will you have the courage to rise above the laughter and prove them all wrong? I hope you do. The world needs more comebacks like yours.